The slap reverberated through the first-class cabin like a gunshot. Not a stumble, not an accident. Captain Bryce Voss swung his open palm across the face of the young black woman in seat 1A with the full, deliberate force of a man who had never once been held accountable for anything in his life. The sound was sickening, loud, final. Her head snapped to the side, the cabin froze. Every passenger in first class stopped breathing at exactly the same moment. Champagne glasses sat untouched, newspapers dropped to laps. Two men in suits stared with their mouths open, unsure if they had just witnessed what they thought they witnessed. A travel blogger in row 3 lowered her phone so slowly it looked like she was moving underwater. Captain Voss stood over seat 1A with his chest puffed out, his jaw set, his silver hair catching the overhead light like a crown he had worn for 30 years and never once questioned. He was not afraid. He was not ashamed. He was a man who believed so deeply in his own authority that the act he had just committed felt to him like order being restored. He saw a girl in a hoodie. He did not see the silent billionaire who had wired $420 million into this airline 11 days earlier, single-handedly pulling it back from the edge of bankruptcy. He did not see the woman who owned the very wings he was standing on. He did not see the person who, before this plane landed, would strip him of his career, his pension, his benefits, and the 30 years of untouchable arrogance he had been hiding behind since the day he pinned those wings to his chest. The young woman did not scream. She did not cry. She did not reach for her cheek or stumble backward or give him any of the reactions he expected, any of the reactions that would have confirmed what he believed about her when he first saw her in that seat. She turned her head back slowly, her dark eyes finding his face. Her expression was not pain. It was not anger. It was something much quieter and much more dangerous than either of those things. It was the look of a person watching a trap close around someone who had walked into it by choice. A single drop of blood welled at the corner of her lip. She did not wipe it away. Not yet. Captain Bryce Voss stood there with his hand still trembling at his side, his chest heaving, adrenaline and ego tangled together in a way he could not separate. For one brief second, something flickered in his eyes. Not regret, not exactly. More like the first faint, distant awareness that he may have miscalculated. But his ego did not allow that awareness to grow. He straightened his jacket. He set his jaw. He looked at the woman in seat 1A the way a man looks at a problem he believes he has already solved. He had no idea he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Her name was Nyla Sinclair. She was 26 years old. She was the founder of Sinclair Capital, one of the most feared private equity firms in New York City. She specialized in one thing, walking into dying giants and rebuilding them from the inside out, quietly, invisibly, without fanfare or announcement, until the day came when she decided the world was ready to know what she had built. 11 days ago, she had saved this airline. Today, she was going to take it back. She did not wipe the blood from her lip. She reached for her phone. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city in the comments below. We want to hear from you wherever you are in the world. And if this moment already stopped you cold, if that sound already made your stomach drop, hit subscribe right now, because what happens next in this cabin, what Nyla Sinclair does in the next 60 minutes, will leave you speechless. This is not just a story about one man and one slap. This is a story about what happens when the people who believe they hold all the power finally meet the person who actually does. Stay with us. Give this video a like if stories like this deserve to be heard. And now, let us go back to where this all started. 2 hours before boarding at JFK Terminal 4 on a cold Tuesday night. The fluorescent lights of JFK Terminal 4 hummed with a low headache-inducing frequency that only seasoned travelers seemed to notice. Most people passed through here in a fog of exhaustion and distraction. They dragged their bags, checked their phones, counted the minutes until boarding. Nyla Sinclair moved differently. She walked slowly, deliberately, the way someone walks when they are watching everything and want no one to know it. Her charcoal gray hoodie was oversized, the sleeves pulled down over her hands, black leggings, scuffed white sneakers that had seen better days, a worn leather duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Nothing flashy, nothing that said money. To anyone glancing her way, she looked like a college student heading home for the holidays on a budget red-eye. She looked like someone who was tired and ordinary and entirely unremarkable. She was none of those things. At 26, Nyla Sinclair was the youngest venture capitalist in New York City's most unforgiving financial circles. She had built Sinclair Capital from nothing, from a one-bedroom apartment in Newark, from a laptop and a relentless certainty that she was right about things that everyone else was too comfortable to see. Her firm specialized in one specific kind of deal, finding companies that were dying, companies that the market had written off, companies drowning in debt and mismanagement and bad leadership, and pulling them back. Not by making noise, by making moves quietly, surgically, without ever letting the world know she was coming until it was already done. 11 days ago, she had wired $420 million into Horizon Airways. The airline had been 48 hours from filing Chapter 11. Its stock had collapsed, its board was fractured, its reputation was bleeding out from a year of canceled flights, crew complaints, and a passenger discrimination lawsuit that had never quite made the news but had never quite gone away either. Horizon Airways was the kind of company most investors looked at and walked away from. Nyla Sinclair looked at it and saw something worth saving. 3 people in the world knew she now owned 78% of the airline: her attorney, the CEO, Donovan Hale, and her grandmother, who lived in Charlotte and did not fully understand what a venture capitalist did, but who understood that her granddaughter never did anything small. To everyone else, Nyla Sinclair was a ghost. Tonight, she wanted to stay that way, at least for a few more hours. She had been receiving reports for 8 months. Anonymous tips forwarded, complaint forms, whispered messages from crew members who were afraid to put their names on anything. The reports all said the same thing in different words. Something was wrong on the JFK-to-Heathrow route. Passengers, specifically passengers who looked a certain way, who dressed a certain way, were being treated differently. Not just poorly, differently. The kind of different that has a name most people flinch from saying out loud. Nyla did not flinch from anything. She was not flying to London for a meeting. She was flying to London to see exactly how her airline treated people when the people running it believed no one powerful was watching. She wanted the unguarded version, the real one, the one that existed when no executive was in the cabin and no camera crew was present, and the crew believed it was just another Tuesday. She could not do that in a tailored blazer with a carry-on that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She could do it in a hoodie and scuffed sneakers. She joined the first-class boarding line at Zone 1. She was first. The gate agent, a woman in her mid-40s named Brenda Holloway, looked at Nyla and then looked at the Zone 1 sign and then looked back at Nyla. She did not scan the phone. Her expression shifted into something she had probably used 1,000 times, the particular combination of patience and condescension that said she believed she was being helpful when she was not. "Miss," Brenda said. Then the word already carried a verdict inside it. "This is Zone 1. General boarding for economy starts in 20 minutes. You need to step aside." Nyla did not blink. She had been here before, not at this gate, but in this exact moment. "I know. I'm in seat 1A. Brenda let out a short breath. That was not quite a laugh. "Please check your ticket again. 1A is reserved for full fare first class. Economy is rows 30 through 60. Nyla looked at her calmly. "Scan the code, Brenda." The use of her name made the agent flinch slightly, the way people flinch when they realize a stranger has read their name tag and is choosing to use it. Brenda picked up the scanner, with the energy of someone who was certain they were about to catch a mistake. She aimed it at Nyla's phone with visible confidence. Beep. Green light. "Passenger Sinclair Nyla, seat 1A, diamond key holder." Brenda stared at the screen. She stared at Nyla's sneakers. She typed something on her keyboard. Her fingers were moving fast, searching for the error that she was sure must be there. "There must be a system error," Brenda muttered. "It says here you're a diamond key holder." "Is there a problem?" Nyla asked, picking up her duffel bag. "No," Brenda said, and the words sounded suspicious rather than apologetic. Her eyes traveled from the phone screen to Nyla's face one more time. "Go ahead." Nyla walked down the jet bridge. The cool air of the tunnel hit her face. She did not feel triumph. She felt something she had felt dozens of times before in dozens of versions of the same moment. A tired, familiar weight. the weight of always having to prove what should never need proving. She breathed through it, studied it, filed it. She had bigger things to focus on tonight. She stepped onto the plane. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 777 was designed to make people feel as though they had stepped out of the world and into something softer. Cream leather seats wide enough to lie flat, walnut wood paneling catching the warm light at angles that made everything look expensive. The quiet clink of champagne flutes being settled into holders. The kind of engineered hush that costs a lot of money to maintain. Nyla moved through it without awe. She had seen rooms like this before. She had built rooms like this before. She found seat 1A, dropped her duffel into the overhead bin, settled in. Lila Vargas appeared almost immediately. 29, dark hair pinned back, a flight attendant's practiced smile on her face. The smile faltered for exactly one fraction of a second when she saw what Nyla was wearing. Just a fraction. The professional instinct snapped it back into place before most people would notice. But Nyla noticed everything. "Welcome aboard," Lila said. "Can I get you anything before we push back?" "Water, please. Thank you." Lila nodded and moved away. Nyla watched her go, already noting the recovery, already noting the instinct that caused the flicker in the first place. She was not angry at Lila. She understood that flicker. It was trained, not chosen. That was partly what she was here to understand. She settled her headphones around her neck and opened her eyes to the cabin. In row 3, she spotted Sofia Alvarez, 27, travel blogger, phone already half raised. The way people who document things for a living instinctively hold their phones, never fully put away, always at an angle. Sofia was watching the boarding process with the casual attentiveness of someone who found other people interesting. She did not notice Nyla looking at her. Seat 4B filled with Senator Derek Lang, 61 years old. The kind of large that comes from decades of good dinners and bad habits. His suit cost more than most cars. He settled into his seat with the energy of a man who expected the world to rearrange itself around his comfort, and who was mildly irritated on the occasions when it took longer than expected. His eyes skimmed the cabin. They landed briefly on Nyla. They stayed a beat too long. Something crossed his face. Not quite recognition, more like a calculation. Then he opened the newspaper he had brought himself because he did not trust airline copies to be the right edition. Across the aisle in 2A, Tyler Langford was already holding champagne. 38, investment banker, a man whose identity had been so thoroughly consumed by the industry he worked in that his personality had become a set of talking points. He glanced at Nyla the way people glance at things they believe do not belong in their space. Not hostile, exactly, just certain. Nyla cataloged all of it. She did not react to any of it. She was not here to react. She was here to watch. The cabin door remained open, more passengers boarding in business class beyond the curtain, the ambient sound of an airport at night, engines somewhere outside, the beeping of ground equipment, the muffled announcements from other gates bleeding through. Then the cockpit door opened. Captain Bryce Voss stepped out. He was exactly the kind of man who looked like he was designed to wear that uniform. 54 years old, silver hair cut military close at the sides, a jawline that suggested a lifetime of expensive dentistry and the confidence that came with it. The uniform was tailored, not standard issue, a man who had paid extra to have it fit a certain way. He carried himself like a building, like something structural, something that did not move because it had never needed to. He was laughing at something over his shoulder, talking to First Officer Elias Cruz about something in the cockpit. The laugh was easy, practiced, the laugh of a man at home in his authority. Then his eyes landed on seat 1A. The laugh stopped, not slowly, not mid-sentence. It stopped the way a sound stops when you press a button. Complete. Immediate. He looked at the seat, then at Nyla, then at the seat again, as if checking whether the seat itself had made a mistake. Nyla had her headphones around her neck and was scrolling through her phone. She did not look up. She did not need to. She could feel the glare, the way you feel weather before it arrives. Captain Voss walked forward. His polished shoes clicked on the galley floor. He did not address Nyla first. He turned to Lila, who had appeared with Nyla's water, and snapped his fingers once. The sound of it made two passengers look up. "Lila," he said, his voice low but carrying well in the quiet cabin, Why is the seat map showing 1A occupied? Because the passenger has boarded, Captain. Voss looked at Nyla. His expression moved through confusion and arrived at something uglier. Her in 1A. She has a valid ticket, sir. Full fare F class. Voss scoffed. Computer glitch. Or maybe she is on staff travel. Did her aunt give her a buddy pass? Lila kept her voice steady. I checked the manifest, Captain. It is a full fare revenue ticket. Voss narrowed his eyes. He looked at Nyla's hoodie, her sneakers, her worn duffel in the overhead bin. He was building a story in real time, and everything he saw was confirming a version of events he had decided was true, before he asked a single question. Nyla felt the weight of his stare. She did not look up. She was counting. Voss squared his shoulders and turned back to Lila. I have Senator Lang flying with us today. He is in 4B. I promised him 1A. He needs the privacy for the transatlantic leg. Lila's voice remained level, though Nyla could hear the effort behind it. Sir, the cabin is full. I cannot move a paying passenger. You can if she does not belong there, Voss said in the way he said she carried a weight that was not about a seat assignment at all. He turned his full attention to Nyla. He stepped toward her. He did not ask permission to enter her space. He did not think permission was something he needed. Excuse me, miss. The word miss landed like a verdict. Nyla looked up. She slid her headphones down to her neck. Her expression was even, her eyes steady, completely unreadable. She had been in versions of this moment since she was 14 years old. She knew exactly how to wear this face. Yes, Captain. I need to see your boarding pass. I already showed it at the gate. I need to see it again. He extended a hand. There has been a mix-up with the seating chart. We believe you are in the wrong seat. Nyla reached into her pocket. She pulled out her phone. She held up the boarding pass. Seat 1A. His name was right there on the screen. Voss did not look at the screen. Right. Well, as I suspected, we have a double booking. This seat is reserved for a VIP passenger. I'm going to need you to gather your things and move back to economy. I am sure we can find you a middle seat somewhere around row 40. Nyla stared at him. The audacity was almost impressive, not the bias. She expected that. The audacity. I paid $14,000 for this seat, Captain. I am not moving. The words fell into the cabin like stones into still water. The ripple moved outward. Tyler Langford stopped mid-sip. Senator Lang's newspaper lowered by 2 inches. Sophia, in row 3, tilted her phone with a movement so subtle it looked like she was simply adjusting her position. Voss's face turned a shade of deep red that did not suit him. He leaned in. His voice dropped, but the quieter it got, the more venom it carried. Listen to me, little girl. I am the captain of this vessel. My word is law. I do not know whose credit card you stole to buy this ticket or which system you found a loophole in. But you are not flying in my first class. Now move. Nyla let the words land. She did not absorb them. She let them bounce off something inside her that had been hardened by years of exactly this in smaller rooms on smaller stages with smaller men. Her voice when she spoke was quieter than his. Captain Voss, she said, reading his name tag with deliberate care, I suggest you check the manifest one more time, and I suggest you read the notes attached to my passenger profile before you continue this conversation. Voss let out a laugh, a dry performative bark. He turned to look at Lang as if sharing a joke. Passenger profile, you think you are special? I have been flying these birds for 28 years. I have flown presidents. I have flown royalty. You are a nobody in a sweatshirt. Derek, a voice from down the aisle. Senator Derek Lang, red-faced, heavy, filling his seat the way senators fill rooms, impatient and used to having that impatience catered to. What is the holdup? I thought you said 1A was open. It is, Senator. Just clearing out some refuse, Voss said, and the gesture he made toward Nyla as he said it was casual, dismissive, the way you wave toward something that has no more significance than a piece of luggage in the wrong place. Nyla stood. She was not tall, but she held herself with a posture that changed the dimensions of the space around her. It was a posture she had learned from her grandmother. It was the posture that said, I know who I am, and that is not something I am offering for debate. Refuse, she said. You heard that? Voss stepped closer. You are disrupting my flight. You are delaying a United States senator, and quite frankly, you are bringing down the standard of this cabin. I'm not moving, Nyla said. Her voice was harder now, not louder, harder. And if you touch my bag, I will have you charged with theft. Voss's eyes bulged. He turned to Lila, who was standing in the galley with her hands pressed flat against the counter, her knuckles pale. Call the gate. Tell them to bring security. I want this passenger removed for unruly behavior. Lila's voice was trembling, but she did not move toward the phone. Sir, she has not done anything. She is just sitting there. She is disobeying a direct order from the captain. That is a federal offense. Now get security. Nyla looked at Lila, one small nod, not asking for help, just acknowledging that Lila existed in this moment, that she was not invisible, that Nyla saw her. No need, Nyla said. She pulled out her phone. I'm making a call. Voss's hand shot out. He swiped the phone from her grip. It clattered onto the floor, slid under the seat across the aisle. The sound of it was sharp and ugly in the quiet of the cabin. No phones, Voss said. His voice had taken on a quality that was past anger, now past ego, into something more irrational and more frightened than either. We are pushing back. You are endangering the safety of this flight. The bridge was still attached. The door was still open. The logic was absurd, but he was not operating on logic anymore. He grabbed Nyla's upper arm. His fingers dug in. She could feel the pressure through the hoodie. Get out now. Nyla yanked her arm back. Her voice rose for the first time, just once, just enough to cut through the cabin air. Do not touch me. Voss did not release her arm. His face was close to hers now, and his eyes had the look of a man who had always gotten what he wanted and could not process the experience of not getting it. You have no idea who I am, Nyla said. I know exactly what you are, Voss said. You are an entitled child who thinks buying a ticket makes you equal to the people in this cabin. You are not my equal. Nyla's eyes did not leave his. I am not your equal, she said very quietly. I am your boss. Tyler Langford looked up from his champagne. Senator Lang's newspaper dropped fully. Even Elias Cruz, visible in the cockpit doorway, went still. Voss stared at her. Then he broke into an incredulous grin, the kind of grin that men like him used when they wanted the people watching to believe they were in on the joke. Your boss. He turned toward Lang. Did you hear that, Senator? She thinks she is the CEO. I did not say CEO, Nyla corrected. I own the CEO. The line landed in the cabin like a match dropped into a very dry room. Nobody laughed, nobody spoke. Voss felt it, the shift in the air, the way the people around him had stopped responding, the way an audience should. He felt the ground moving slightly under the architecture of his certainty, and the feeling made him furious in a way that he did not know how to process without action. I have had enough, he said. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them in a way that was meant to be intimidating and was instead simply honest about what he intended. Last warning. Walk off this plane or I will drag you off. Nyla did not step back. She did not flinch. She held her ground with the stillness of someone who had been calculating 10 moves ahead, while he had been reacting to the last one. Try it, she said. That was the spark. Voss's hand moved before his brain caught up. Open palm, full swing, crack. The sound echoed through the first-class cabin like something breaking that was never meant to break. Nyla's head snapped to the side, her cheek burned. The pain was immediate and real and radiating. Lila screamed, her hand flying to her mouth. Sophia, in row 3, had gone completely still, her phone recording without her, needing to consciously direct it anymore, her body having taken over because her brain could not quite catch up with what it had just witnessed. Tyler Langford was on his feet, not to help. He did not know what to do, so he just stood as though standing was a form of participation. Senator Lang had pressed himself back into his seat. His face had gone from red to a color that had no name. Elias Cruz was gripping the cockpit doorframe. Nyla stood with her face turned to the side. The cabin was completely silent, completely still. The kind of still that only happens when something has occurred that everyone present will carry with them for the rest of their lives. Slowly, Nyla turned her head back. Her lip was cut, a bead of blood, small and dark, welling at the corner of her mouth. Her expression had shifted in a way that no one in this cabin had words for. Not anger, not pain, not shock. Something much older than all of those, something clear and cold and absolutely certain of what came next. She looked at Captain Bryce Voss the way a person looks when they have just watched someone hand them exactly what they needed. Voss stood there with his hands still trembling, his chest heaving, the adrenaline wearing off fast enough to show him the edges of what he had just done in front of witnesses, in front of a senator, in front of a flight attendant and a travel blogger and a first officer and every passenger sitting in these 14 seats. That, he breathed, is what happens when you disobey the captain of a vessel. Nyla wiped the blood from the corner of her lip with her thumb. She held it there for a moment looking at it. Then she looked at Voss with the absolute composure of someone who had just watched a trap close. "Lila," she said. Her voice was so steady it sounded unnatural. So steady, it made several passengers exhale involuntarily as though they had been waiting for permission to breathe. "Yes," Lila said, her voice trembling, tears at the edges of her eyes. "Yes, Miss Sinclair." "Please pick up my phone." Lila scrambled. She retrieved the phone from under the seat, handed it to Nyla with both hands trembling. Nyla took it. "Thank you." She unlocked the screen. She did not call the police. She did not call the gate. She opened a contact interface, black and gold, and pressed a single name at the top of the list. Hale. She put the phone to her ear. The cabin was so quiet that everyone could hear the ringing tone once, twice. The phone rang a third time. Nyla stood in the aisle of seat 1A, blood drying at the corner of her lip. The whole cabin, watching, and something behind her eyes went somewhere else for just a moment. Not away, just back. She was 14 years old, and she was in a department store in Charlotte, North Carolina, standing next to her grandmother in the scarf aisle. The store was warm and crowded with a Saturday afternoon crowd, and Nyla was wearing her good dress, the navy one her grandmother had ironed the night before because her grandmother always said that how you present yourself tells people how much you value yourself and nothing less. Nyla reached for a scarf hanging on a display rack, silk deep red, the kind of thing she had never touched before. A saleswoman appeared from nowhere, white, 50s, the kind of practiced smile that was doing three things at once. "Can I help you? That is a very expensive item." Not a question, a boundary marker, a small, polite fence built in the space between them. Nyla pulled her hand back. Her grandmother's hand found Nyla's and took it, not urgently, with a deliberate calm that was its own kind of statement. "Shoulders back, baby," her grandmother said, quiet enough that only Nyla could hear. "They only have power if you give it to them." They bought the scarf. Her grandmother paid without hesitation, without explanation, without offering the saleswoman any more than the transaction required. They walked out of the store with their heads level, their spines straight, their steps unhurried. Nyla carried that walk with her for the rest of her life, that posture, that choice, the understanding that dignity is not something someone else can take from you. It is only something you can surrender. She did not surrender it. She was 20 years old and she was in a conference room at NYU presenting a business plan to a panel of 3 professors. She had worked on it for 6 weeks. She knew every number, every projection, every assumption underlying every forecast. The professor at the center of the table, gray-haired, leaned back in his chair before she was finished reading page 2. "These are very ambitious projections," he said, "for someone with your background." He smiled when he said it. He believed he was being encouraging. He was telling her gently that her ceiling was lower than the numbers she had written down. Nyla looked at him. She did not argue. She did not explain. She went home that night and she rewrote the plan. Every projection, every number, she doubled them. She built the evidence for why they were not ambitious at all, why they were conservative, why the ceiling this man saw in her was a construction of his imagination and not a feature of her reality. That business plan was the seed of Sinclair Capital. 6 years later, Sinclair Capital managed $4 billion in assets. She did not send the professor a note. She was 23, and she was flying first class for the first time. Sinclair Capital had just closed its first $50 million fund. She was on a flight from LaGuardia to Chicago, seat 2C. Not even the premium position, but still first class. Still a seat that cost more than she used to spend on groceries in a month. She was wearing a hoodie because she always wore a hoodie when she traveled because she ran cold, and plane cabins were unreliable, and she had stopped letting other people's expectations dress her 3 years earlier. The flight attendant on that flight was a woman in her late 40s. She saw Nyla settling into 2C and approached with a smile that was doing exactly what Brenda's smile at the gate was doing tonight. "Oh, honey," she said, "I think you might be in the wrong seat. Economy is all the way in the back." Nyla showed her the boarding pass. The woman took it, examined it for a long time, far longer than a boarding pass requires, long enough that the woman in 2D looked up from her book and looked away again, embarrassed on Nyla's behalf. The attendant handed it back without apology, without acknowledgement of what had just happened. She walked away. Nyla put her headphones in. The plane took off. That night, in her Chicago hotel room, she opened her notebook and she wrote 3 words. One day, own it. She underlined it twice. She meant a room like this one, a space like this one. She meant some version of first class, some corner of the world where people like her were not the exception that needed to be verified, but the standard that defined the space. She did not, at 23, think she meant an entire airline, but here she was. The phone rang a fourth time. Nyla came back to the cabin. The blood was drying on her lip. The cabin was still frozen around her, 14 people and a flight crew all suspended in the moment after something terrible had happened, and before anyone knew what happened next. Nyla looked at Captain Bryce Voss. He had not just slapped a passenger, he had slapped a promise. She was not going to wipe the blood away. She was going to let it stay there, visible, undeniable, until every person who needed to see it had seen it. She was going to let this moment be exactly as large as it deserved to be. The call connected. "Nyla, is that you? We were not expecting you to call until you landed." Donovan. Her voice was flat and controlled and carried no emotion that she was not choosing to put there. In 17 years of investing in damaged things, Nyla Sinclair had learned that the most powerful language was language stripped of everything but the facts. "I am on flight 404. I'm in first class." A pause, brief. "Is everything all right? Is the service up to par?" "No, Donovan, it is not." She paused for exactly 1 beat. "Captain Bryce Voss just slapped me in the face." The silence that followed was not brief. It was the silence of a man whose entire understanding of his situation was restructuring itself in real time. It was the silence of someone who had just heard something that made every problem he thought he had this morning feel very, very small by comparison. He did what? The voice of Donovan Hale, CEO of Horizon Airways, had dropped to something barely above a whisper. In the quiet of the first-class cabin, every passenger could hear both sides of this conversation, and several of them were beginning to do the math. "He slapped me because he wanted my seat for Senator Lang. He called me refuse. He grabbed my arm. He physically assaulted me on an aircraft that I own." Hale's voice was shaking now, not with confusion, with the specific kind of horror that belongs to a person who understood exactly what this meant, and who could not get ahead of it fast enough. "Nyla, I'm calling the tower immediately. Do not move. I'm coming down there myself. Please, please, tell me you are joking." "I wish I were." She let that land. Then she added, "Oh, and Donovan, ground the plane. Cancel the flight. Nobody is going anywhere." She hung up. The cabin erupted not loudly, not with shouting, but with the particular chaos of 14 people simultaneously reassessing everything they thought they knew about what they were witnessing. Whispers, a sharp intake of breath, the rustle of someone turning in their seat to see Nyla more clearly. Sofia Alvarez had stopped pretending to be casual. Her phone was fully raised now, aimed at the aisle, and her expression was the expression of a person who had come to document interesting things and had just found herself standing inside the most interesting thing she had ever witnessed. Tyler Langford had put his champagne glass down on the tray table and had not picked it back up. Captain Voss's expression had moved into a new territory. He was still holding the performance of authority, the squared shoulders and the set jaw. But underneath it, something had gone loose, something uncertain. He was telling himself it was a bluff. He was telling himself Nyla had called a friend who pretended to be the CEO. He was telling himself the tower had not called and the plane was not grounded, and in 5 minutes, he would have this girl removed and this flight would push back and everything would go back to the version of events where he was in control. He turned to address the cabin. His voice boomed too loud for the confined space. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disturbance. We have an unstable passenger who has made a scene and made some threatening phone calls. Security is on the way to remove her, and we will be underway shortly. He turned back to Nyla. Good performance. Calling a friend to pretend to be the CEO, but the tower has not called me. We are not grounded. In about 3 minutes, you are going to be escorted off this aircraft by Port Authority, and this will be a very bad evening for you personally. As if the aircraft itself had been listening to this conversation and decided to weigh in, the flight deck intercom chimed. The sound cut through the cabin like a blade. Elias Cruz appeared in the cockpit doorway. 28 years old, lean with the face of someone who had gotten into aviation because he loved the science of it and had spent the last 4 years discovering that aviation also involved a great deal of politics. His expression right now was the expression of a man who would very much prefer to be somewhere else, but knew that was not an option. "Captain," he said, and his voice had the precise quality of someone choosing their words with great care. "Tower just hailed us. They have revoked our pushback clearance." Voss's stomach dropped. The sound of it was almost audible in his face. "What? Why?" "Code red. Stop order from HQ. They are locking the gate." He paused and he added very quietly, because Elias Cruz was a man who understood that certain things needed to be said, regardless of rank. "Port Authority police are en route." The first-class cabin had gone absolutely still again. Not the stillness after the slap, which was shock. This was the stillness of understanding. This was the stillness of people watching an empire start to come apart. Voss looked at Nyla. She had not moved. She was sitting in seat 1A with her hands folded in her lap, dabbing at the corner of her lip with a cocktail napkin that Lila had pressed into her hand. She looked bored in the way that only truly powerful people look bored in the middle of a crisis, because the crisis was going exactly as planned. Senator Derek Lang rose from seat 4B. He had been watching this carefully and calculating the way politicians calculate, measuring which direction the wind was moving and positioning himself accordingly. But he had waited too long to pick a side, and now both sides were looking at him. "Now see here," Lang said, his voice carrying the particular authority of a man who had sat on the Transportation Committee for 11 years. "I have a fundraising dinner in London tonight. I cannot be delayed by this nonsense. If the police are coming, let them take her off and let us get moving. I will call the chief of police myself if I have to." He turned to Nyla, pointed a thick ringed finger at her. "Young lady, do you know who I am? I sit on the Transportation Committee. I can have you put on the no-fly list so fast your head will spin. You are interfering with federal business." Nyla looked up at him. Her gaze was the gaze of someone who had read his entire file and found it unimpressive. "Sit down, Derek," she said. Lang blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said sit down. You are not in the Senate right now. You are on a metal aircraft that I paid for, and considering that your last campaign received $175,000 from one of my holding companies last quarter, I would lower your voice before I ask for a refund." The color drained from Lang's face. He recognized that tone. That tone did not come from position or title. That tone came from a place further back than either of those things. It came from money that had roots, from a person who did not need to perform wealth because wealth was simply a fact of their existence. He sat down. He found the safety instruction card in the seat pocket. Very interesting. Suddenly, Voss watched his most important ally fold into a chair. He was alone now. He turned to Lila, his last option, his last play. "Get into the cockpit," he said. "Lock the door. We are initiating lockdown procedures. I am not going to be removed from my own aircraft by a passenger." Lila looked at him. Something had changed in her face in the last 20 minutes. It had been changing slowly, the way things that had been building for a long time finally reached a surface. She had worked this route for 3 years. She had watched Bryce Voss do small versions of this exact thing to different passengers in different seats for 3 years. She had filed nothing. She had said nothing. She had told herself it was not her place. that she needed her job. That one person could not change a culture that had been built over decades. "No," she said. Voss stared at her. "What did you say?" "I said no." Her voice was shaking, but her chin was up. She took one step forward, one deliberate step forward until she was standing beside seat 1A, physically placing herself between the captain and the passenger. "I watched you hit her, Bryce. I'm not locking anything. I'm waiting for the police." "This is mutiny," Voss said, and the words sounded almost childish now. "It is assault," Nyla corrected very gently, "and it is about to be quite a bit worse for you." Outside the windows of Seat 1A, the blue and red lights of three Port Authority cruisers painted the wet tarmac in rotating color. Behind them, pulling to a stop at the gate entrance with a decisiveness that belonged only to vehicles carrying people who had been told exactly how urgent the situation was. A black SUV parked in the no-stopping zone. Its license plate read Horizon 1. Donovan Hale had arrived. The boots on the jet bridge came quickly. Two Port Authority officers entered first, hands at their holsters, taking in the cabin with the rapid visual sweep of people trained to assess situations before anyone had explained them. They saw the flight attendant positioned beside a passenger in seat 1A. They saw the captain standing in the aisle with the posture of a man who had been losing for the last 10 minutes and had not yet admitted it. They saw the first officer in the cockpit doorway, visibly relieved to have authority entering the room that did not belong to Bryce Voss. Behind the officers, a man in an Italian suit entered the cabin. The suit was expensive but disheveled. The tie was slightly crooked. There was a quality of perspiration about Donovan Hale that suggested he had driven very fast from wherever he was and had not stopped to compose himself, which was not like Donovan Hale at all, which told Nyla something about the state of his fear. Voss straightened up. His shoulders came back. Whatever expression he arranged for Hale's arrival was the expression of a man reaching for an authority he had already lost. "Mr. Hale," Voss said, putting on his fullest captain's voice, "thank God you are here. This passenger has been causing a significant disturbance. She has been unruly and verbally threatening, and she has refused multiple direct orders from—" Donovan Hale did not look at Voss. He walked past him. Not around him, past him, the way you walk past furniture. Hale went directly to seat 1A. He stopped in front of Nyla. He looked at her face, at the bruise forming beneath her eye, at the cut on her lip, dried now but undeniable. His face did something complicated. He lowered himself to a crouch, bringing himself to eye level with her, which was a posture that did not belong to a man asserting power. It was the posture of a man who knew exactly where the power in this interaction sat and who wanted in some small physical way to acknowledge it. "Miss Sinclair," he said. His voice was low and not entirely steady. "I do not have words. I am devastated." Nyla looked at him evenly. "Hello, Donovan. You made good time." "I was in the terminal for a meeting." He could not take his eyes off her lip. "He actually hit you." Open palm, full swing in front of witnesses and a functioning cabin crew member. Hale stood up slowly. He turned around. The panic was gone from his face. The disheveled quality of his entrance was gone. What remained was the expression of a man who had been running a company for 9 years and knew exactly what the next 72 hours required of him, and who was going to deliver on every single one of those requirements. He looked at Voss. Voss was trying something with his face that was meant to look like confidence. It looked like a person attempting to look like confidence. David Voss starts. "Sir, let me explain. The seat situation was genuinely a—" "You didn't know," Hale said, his voice very quiet. His voice was the kind of quiet that was worse than shouting because it meant the decision had already been made. "You didn't know that you are categorically not allowed to physically assault a paying passenger on this or any other aircraft. Is that the explanation? Is that the part I am supposed to accept?" She was resisting, Voss said, and the words sounded wrong even as it left his mouth. "I'm the captain. I have the authority to maintain order on this vessel." "You are a liability," Hale said. He turned to the officers. "Officers, I want this man removed from my aircraft immediately. I want to file charges on behalf of the airline and on behalf of this passenger. Assault and battery." The officers stepped forward. Voss's composure collapsed completely. Donovan, come on. 28 years. I have given this airline 28 years. I am 6 months from full retirement. I have 3.2 million in that pension fund. You cannot do this. We go back. Hale did not look at him. Nyla stood. She picked up her duffel bag from the overhead bin and set it at her feet. Then she walked across the aisle and stood in front of Voss. She was not tall enough to look down at him. She looked straight at him instead. And somehow, that was more unsettling. Donovan, she said, does Captain Voss have a standard employment contract? Yes, Miss Sinclair, union contract. Does it contain a morality clause? It does. Does it contain a clause relating to gross misconduct and actions that bring disrepute to the company? It certainly does. Good. She held Voss's gaze. Void it. All of it. The pension, the benefits, the retirement package, the severance. All of it. Voss's mouth opened. Yes, you cannot do that. The union will fight you every step of the way. You have no idea how much leverage those protections carry. I have 3.2 million in that fund, and they will... Nyla's voice dropped to something so quiet that only Voss could hear the full weight of it. I acquired the union's pension management firm 14 days ago, Bryce. It was part of the same restructuring package. File a grievance. I have more attorneys than you have excuses, and I promise you the paperwork will take longer than your retirement ever would have. He stared at her. He looked at her the way people look at things that have rearranged themselves into a shape they do not recognize. He had been filling in details about this woman since the moment he saw her in 1A. He had been certain about those details. He had been certain about the hoodie and the sneakers and the worn duffel bag and every story those things told him about who she was and what she was doing in that seat. Every single one of those certainties was dismantling itself in real time. Who are you? He said. The question came out small. It came out with none of the authority that had carried his voice for 28 years. Nyla Sinclair did not raise her voice. She did not need to. I am Nyla Sinclair, she said clearly, loudly enough for every person in the first-class cabin to hear. I am the founder of Sinclair Capital. I own 78% of Horizon Airways, and you. She looked at Voss with something that was neither triumph nor anger, but simply truth. Are trespassing on my property. The cabin erupted, not in chaos, in something closer to release. The sound of people who had been holding their breath for 20 minutes finally exhaling all at once. Tyler Langford, who had been standing since the slap, sat back down heavily. Elias Cruz gripped the cockpit doorframe and closed his eyes briefly, something private crossing his face. Sofia Alvarez lowered her phone and a single tear ran down her face. Not from sadness, from the particular overwhelm of witnessing something that needed to be witnessed. In seat 2B, a woman in her late 60s, pearl earrings, silver hair, the kind of quiet elegance that belongs to people who have seen a great deal, began to clap slowly, deliberately. Clap, clap, clap. The man across from her joined. Then Lila Vargas, still standing beside seat 1A, her eyes wet, her chin still raised, brought her hands together. Within 15 seconds, the entire first-class cabin was applauding, not wildly, steadily, the kind of applause that said, we saw this, we witnessed this, and we will not pretend otherwise. Captain Bryce Voss was escorted down the aisle in handcuffs. He passed every passenger in first class. He did not meet any of their eyes. He kept his head down, his shoulders pulled forward, the silver hair and the tailored uniform suddenly small. Suddenly ordinary, suddenly the clothing of a man rather than the armor of an institution. At the door, he stopped. He looked back one final time. He found Nyla's face. He expected to see triumph there, a smirk, the satisfaction of victory, something he could interpret as small or petty or gloating, something that would let him recast himself as the victim of someone else's ego. Nyla Sinclair was not looking at him. She was already looking at her phone. He was already irrelevant. That hurt more than the handcuffs. The cabin door closed behind Captain Bryce Voss, and it was the most absolute sound in the world. Hale exhaled. He wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. Miss Sinclair, again, my sincerest apologies. I will have a replacement crew here in 45 minutes. I will personally pull the reserve team. I don't need comfort, Donovan. I need competence. She gestured toward the open cockpit door. Who is flying this plane now? Elias Cruz appeared in the doorway. He looked younger than his age right now. Or maybe he looked exactly his age, and it was simply that the person who was making him seem older had just left. Officer Cruz, Nyla said, did you agree with Captain Voss's assessment that I should be removed from this aircraft? Cruz swallowed. He looked at Hale. Then he looked at Nyla. No, ma'am. I told him he was making a mistake. He outranked me. I could not override him on the ground without documented cause. You have documented cause now, she held his gaze. In the future, Officer Cruz, if a captain endangers a passenger or places this airline's integrity at risk, you take the controls. The rank stays on the uniform. The authority stays with the right decision. Do you understand that? Yes, ma'am, without question. Good. She looked at Hale. Who is the most senior qualified pilot currently on the ground at JFK? Hale thought. That would be Captain Julian Moreau. He just arrived as a passenger on a return leg from Paris. He is current on the 777. He keeps his certification active. Find him, Nyla said. And as if the conversation had conjured him, a man in seat 4C who had been sitting with a paperback novel open on his lap and the quiet amusement of someone watching a very good play looked up. 58 years old, gray temples, sharp, intelligent eyes. The retired Air France chief pilot did not say anything. He simply closed his book. Nyla looked at him. Captain Moreau, I believe you have been following this conversation. Moreau's mouth curved into something that was not quite a smile, more like the expression of a man who had spent 40 years in the sky and found to his own surprise that he was not done. It would be an honor, Mademoiselle Sinclair, he said, in somewhat better circumstances perhaps, but an honor. Excellent. She turned back to Hale. Get him cleared in 20 minutes. I want to be in the air in 30. She sat back down in seat 1A. She crossed her legs. She picked up her phone and opened her London flight logs. The cabin moved around her, the quiet, efficient chaos of a crew preparing for departure without its captain. And Nyla Sinclair sat at the center of it all with the stillness of someone who had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. The cabin needed 3 minutes to settle, 3 minutes for the officers to complete their removal for the jet bridge. Sounds too quiet for the remaining first-class passengers to recalibrate and realize that the world they entered through the boarding door an hour ago no longer matched the world they were currently sitting in. Senator Derek Lang used those 3 minutes to look out the window and think. When he turned back, his face had adopted the expression of a skilled politician performing contrition. He had been performing contrition in various rooms for 11 years, and he was genuinely good at it. The eyebrows pitched slightly down, the voice calibrated to a register of earnestness, the choice to use the word unfortunately at least once. Miss Sinclair, he said, sliding slightly forward in his seat to convey sincerity through physical proximity. He cleared his throat. I want to say that what happened here tonight was utterly inappropriate, and I am deeply sorry that you experienced it. Bryce was always volatile. I should have intervened sooner, and I did not, and that is something I will carry. He paused for the weight of that to land. He watched Nyla's face. Nyla took a sip of water. You called me refuse, Derek, she said. You watched him grab my arm and you laughed. You stood up a moment ago and threatened to have me put on a no-fly list. She set the glass down. You're apologizing now because you know who I am, not because of what he did to me. Lang's performance wavered. Now, let's not be hasty. Context matters in high-pressure situations. Words get said. You have been lobbying against the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Act for 2 years, Nyla said calmly. Factually, the oil industry PACs have paid your campaign committee approximately $400,000 to keep that bill from reaching a floor vote. She looked at him directly. I have the contribution records. I also have the footage of the last 40 minutes of this cabin, including the moment you called me refuse and laughed while a man twice my size put his hands on me. I have it cloud synced already. Lang's face changed. That is not something we need to. You are going to vote yes on the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Act when it comes to the floor next week. The senator's mouth opened. That bill, he said, his voice dropping to something that was half argument and half plea. That bill would cost my primary donors millions of dollars. If I vote yes, I am done. My next cycle is... And if I release this footage, Nyla said, your current cycle ends. She picked up her phone. The choice is yours. I have about 90 seconds of patience left for this conversation. Lang stared at the phone. He thought about the $400,000. He thought about the oil packs and the fundraising dinner in London and the career that he had spent 30 years building. He thought about how careers end and how the ones that end with video evidence are the ones that do not come back. Fine, he said. The word came out like something dropped from a height. Yes, I will vote yes. Nyla nodded. And one more thing. Lang looked at her with the expression of a man who suspected correctly that the one more thing was going to be worse than everything that had come before it. Nyla pointed toward the rear of the aircraft. Economy is rows 30 through 60. Senator, I understand the middle seats are quite comfortable. Lang blinked. You cannot be serious. I'm the owner of this aircraft. She kept her voice completely level, and I reserve the right to refuse continued first-class service to any passenger whose conduct during boarding has been inconsistent with the standards of this cabin. You can move or you can deplane. Either works for my schedule. For a moment, Senator Derek Lang, 11-year member of the United States Senate, chairman of 2 subcommittees, a man who had not waited in a line since 2017, simply stared at her. Then he picked up his briefcase, he buttoned his jacket. He stood and he walked down the aisle of the aircraft, passing through the first-class curtain, passing through business class, passing through the galley, disappearing into economy with the particular dignity of a man who had none left and was choosing to project it anyway. Sofia Alvarez in row 3 watched him go. She pressed her lips together very tightly. Then she looked at Nyla. Nyla was already on her phone reviewing London flight logs, completely indifferent to the senator's departure. A woman who had made her point and moved on because there were larger things waiting. Sophia looked back at the economy curtain. She exhaled through her nose. Tyler Langford, very quietly, very carefully, picked up his champagne glass and set it in the tray return slot. He decided he did not need it after all. He reclined his seat, faced the window, and did not speak again for the remainder of the flight. The cabin settled. Lila moved through it quietly, bringing water, adjusting temperatures, performing the ordinary work of care. That is what good flight attendants do when everything else has stripped away. She stopped at seat 1A and looked at Nyla. Are you all right? She asked. Nyla considered the question. I am. She looked up at Lila. Are you? Lila thought about this with more honesty than the question usually received. I think I am, she said finally, for the first time in a long time honestly. Yes. Good, Nyla said, because I'm going to need your help with something. Lila sat down in the seat across the aisle and Nyla Sinclair began to explain what she had found in the cargo manifest 30,000 feet above the Atlantic. The cabin was dark. Most passengers had reclined into the flatbed positions and drawn their privacy screens. The engines were a constant low hum that became after an hour or so indistinguishable from silence. Nyla Sinclair was awake. She had an ice pack pressed against her cheek. The bruise had deepened into a vivid purple. The kind of bruise that photographed clearly, that no one could look at and attribute to anything other than what it was. She did not try to reduce it. She let the cold do what it could and left the rest. Her laptop was open, but she was not looking at spreadsheets. She was looking at fuel load data. Lila Vargas sat across from her. Both of them leaned slightly forward in the dimness, speaking in the particular register of a conversation that needed to stay between 2 people. You said Voss always bid for this route, Nyla said. Always. Tuesdays and Fridays, JFK to Heathrow, without exception for at least 2 years that I know of. Flight attendants bid for their routes too. And the rest of us would try for this one because London is good. The layover hotel is excellent. But Voss would always bump whoever had it. He had enough seniority to do it, and he always did. Why would a senior captain want this specific route? Nyla asked. What is special about it? Lila's hands were folded in her lap. She was looking at them. The extra carts, she said. On every flight Voss piloted on this route, there were additional catering carts loaded into the forward galley, heavy ones. They were labeled VIP reserves, which is a designation that exists, but that I had never seen applied to anything like what these were. They were solid metal sides. They did not sound the way catering carts sound, and nobody was allowed to open them. Nyla was typing as Lila spoke, pulling up cargo manifests on the secure server. Voss fought with the fuel team on every single departure, Lila continued. He always requested more fuel than the flight plan required. The fuel guys pushed back every time, and he always overrode them. We thought he was just obsessive. Some pilots are very conservative about fuel. We thought it was that he needed the extra fuel because the plane was heavier than the filed weight. Yes, Nyla said, her voice very quiet. That is what I think now. That is what I have been thinking for 6 months but did not know how to say to anyone. Nyla found the fuel burn data from the flight computer. She checked it against the listed cargo weight. The numbers did not match, not by a small amount. By the kind of amount that meant something substantial was on this aircraft that nobody had documented. You mentioned a flight attendant named Rosa, Nyla said. Lila's expression changed. Elena Vargas. She was 24. She had been on this route for a year. 6 months ago, we ran low on certain supplies mid-flight, and Elena went to the forward galley to look in one of the extra carts. She thought she was being practical. Voss came out of the cockpit and found her there. He did not hit her, but what he did was close to it. He screamed at her until she had a panic attack in the galley. 3 of us witnessed it, and the next day she was fired. Filed as theft of airline property, which she did not commit, Nyla said. She opened a cart to look for tonic water, and her career ended. Nyla sat back in her seat. She held the ice pack against her cheek and she looked at the cargo manifest on her screen, and she did the arithmetic of it. Not just the financial arithmetic, though, that was there too. Approximately $48 million in unlisted metal per flight, twice a week for 2 years. The human arithmetic. Elena Vargas, 24 years old, fired for opening a cart. Anonymous flight crew members who had sent reports for 8 months without their names attached because they were afraid of exactly what happened to Elena. Who handles ground operations in London? Nyla asked. Who meets this plane? There is always the same manager waiting on the tarmac, Victor Kane, regional VP for Europe. He and Voss know each other well. You can tell by the way they are when they see each other, not like colleagues, like partners. Nyla pulled up Victor Kane's personnel file, 51 years old, impeccable presentation. 5 years with Horizon, promoted twice before Horizon, a logistics coordinator for a shipping company that was shut down by customs authorities in Rotterdam for undeclared cargo violations. She stared at the screen. The slap was not just ego, she said more to herself than to Lila. It was panic. I was sitting in 1A right next to the galley, right where the carts are. He wanted Lang there, a man who would drink 3 glasses of scotch and sleep until Heathrow. He did not want a sharp-eyed stranger sitting 18 inches from the thing he needed nobody to look at. Lila was very still. What are you going to do? She asked. Kane has protected himself for years. He has the infrastructure and the relationships. If he knows you are coming, he will not know I am coming, Nyla said, until I am already there. She closed the laptop. She got up from her seat and went to the lavatory. She looked in the mirror for a long time at the bruise on her face. The purple was deepening at the edges. It was not subtle. It was not something anyone could look at and argue with. She opened her makeup kit. Instead of concealer, she picked up a shade of plum shadow and carefully, precisely built the bruise into something more visible, more unmistakable, more impossible to dismiss. She was not exaggerating an injury. She was making sure that what was real could not be minimized. Then she put her hood up. She looked in the mirror at a young black woman in a gray hoodie with a bruise on her face. She looked like exactly what Bryce Voss had decided she was when he first saw her in seat 1A. A nobody. She picked up the intercom phone outside the lavatory door. Captain Moreau, she said. The voice that came back was warm and precise in the way of people who had spent decades in command of large aircraft. Yes, Mademoiselle Sinclair. When we land, I need you to request remote parking on the cargo stand, not the terminal gate. Tell the tower it is a hydraulic inspection, a precautionary measure. A pause. The passengers will be inconvenienced. I will handle the passengers. Can you do it? Moreau was quiet for a moment. Then, of course. And if anyone asks why the owner is parking her own plane in the freight yard at 5 in the morning, tell them I like the view. A short sound that might be a laugh, the kind that pilots make when something has surprised them and they respect it. I will have us on the cargo stand in 50 minutes, mademoiselle. Nyla hung up. She walked back to seat 1A. She sat down. She pulled her hood lower over her face, adjusted the angle so it caught the shadows the way she wanted it to, and closed her eyes. She did not sleep. She was thinking about a phone call she needed to make before they landed, about a unit she had the private number for, about how quickly certain authorities responded when certain keywords appeared in certain communications. Victor Kane was waiting at Heathrow for a cargo delivery. He was about to receive something he did not expect. Heathrow Airport was gray and rain-soaked at 5:47 in the morning, the kind of gray that belongs specifically to English airports before the day has decided what it is going to be. The tarmac reflected the runway lights in long, wet streaks. Ground crews moved through the mist in high-visibility jackets, their breath visible in the cold. The Boeing 777 from JFK did not taxi to Terminal 5. It rolled steadily away from the glittering terminal lights, past the freight carriers and the maintenance bays, toward the industrial far end of the airfield, where aircraft go when something needs to be examined away from public sight. First Officer Elias Cruz came onto the PA system. His voice was careful and calm, the voice of someone who had been told what to say and understood why. Ladies and gentlemen, due to a minor technical indication with our landing gear, we have been directed to a remote stand for a precautionary safety check. Buses will arrive shortly to take you to the terminal. We apologize for the inconvenience and thank you for your patience. A low groan moved through the cabin. Economy passengers shifting in their seats. Nyla did not move. She watched the window. The engines spooled down. The aircraft settled into stillness. Outside in the pre-dawn dark, Nyla saw the headlights of vehicles approaching from the freight side of the airfield. Not the usual ground equipment, not the yellow of baggage vehicles, or the orange of catering trucks, black SUVs, a white unmarked van high-sided at large. A man in a long trench coat stepped out of the lead vehicle before it had fully stopped. Already on a walkie-talkie, already scanning the aircraft with the expression of someone who expected to arrive at a specific terminal and had found himself in entirely the wrong location. Victor Kane, even from the window, even in the poor light, the file photographs were accurate. 51 years old, silver at his temples, the kind of physical presence that comes from a career spent making people uncomfortable in rooms. He was gesticulating at the aircraft. He was furious. His operation depended on Terminal 5 and the jet bridge and the specific blind spots that a busy international terminal creates between arrival and customs. Remote cargo stand was a catastrophe for what he needed to do. Nyla pulled her hood lower. She waited until Lila confirmed the service door was open and the portable stairs were in place. Then she stepped off the plane. The Heathrow morning hit her immediately. Cold, damp, the smell of aviation fuel and rain-soaked concrete. She kept her shoulders hunched, her steps uncertain, her whole body arranged into the shape of someone who had had a very bad night and was doing her best to navigate a situation she did not fully understand. Victor Kane was at the bottom of the stairs. He looked up. His eyes found her hoodie, her youth, her visible exhaustion. His expression was that of a man who had been waiting for someone else and had been given a problem instead. "Who are you?" he said. His voice had an accent sharpened by decades in logistics, clipped and certain. "Where is Voss? Why is this plane parked out here?" Nyla descended the last 3 steps and stopped in front of him. "Voss is not coming," she said. Her voice was small and slightly hoarse, nothing like the voice she had used in the cabin. "He was arrested in New York." Kane's posture changed. "Arrested." He lost control of his situation. He assaulted a passenger. She turned her face slightly, letting the cargo bay work lights hit the bruise on her cheek directly. She let him see it clearly. "He hit me." Kane looked at the bruise with the expression of a man to whom physical violence was an inconvenience rather than an outrage. He did not ask if she was all right. "Did he say anything?" he asked, "before they took him about the cargo?" Nyla paused. She let the pause last exactly long enough to be convincing. "He said to give you a message." Kane stepped closer. His voice dropped. "What message?" "He said the VIP carts in the forward galley are unlocked. He said, you need to get them off the aircraft before the police start asking about the weight discrepancy." The string of words that left Victor Kane's mouth was impressive in its creativity and specificity. He turned to the 2 large men who had been standing by the white van and signaled to them with a sharp chop of his hand. "Get on board. Forward galley carts with red tape, 20 minutes, or we have a customs problem. Move. The men brushed past Nyla and up the stairs. Kane watched them go, then reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a stack of British pounds, roughly 500 or so. Here, he said, holding it out to Nyla, for your trouble. Get on a bus with the rest of them, and if anyone asks whether you saw vehicles near this aircraft, the answer is no. If I find out you said anything different, I will find you. Do you understand? Nyla looked at the money. I don't want your money, Mr. Kane. Something shifted in his face, the quick recalculation of a man who expected compliance and was not receiving it. Then what? He said. Do you want? I want to see what is in the boxes. Kane looked at her with the expression of a man who had heard something that sounded absurd and was trying to determine how seriously to take it. You have a death wish, sweetheart, he said. It is corporate logistics. It does not concern you. It concerns me considerably, Nyla said. And the warmth had gone out of her voice now, the affected smallness of it, the performance of a scared girl on a tarmac at dawn. She reached into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out her phone, because according to the manifest I am reading right now, Horizon Airways is not authorized to transport gold bullion. And yet, the fuel consumption data from tonight's flight suggests approximately $50 million worth of unlisted metal in the cargo hold. Kane went completely still. The rain fell between them. How do you have the manifest? He said very quietly. That is restricted access, internal only. I have it because I have the master key. She stepped down from the last step, stood on the tarmac, stood in front of him with the rain hitting her face and her bruise darkening in the poor light and her eyes exactly as steady as they were in seat 1, 6 hours earlier. I am not a flight attendant, Victor, and I am not a passenger. I am the person who just terminated your employment. From the top of the stairs, one of Kane's men leaned down. Boss, the carts are empty. There is nothing in them. Kane's eyes did not leave Nyla's face. Where is it? He said. Where's the cargo? It is currently in the hold being accessed by UK Border Force, Nyla said. I made a call before we landed. His hand moved to his coat. His fingers found what was there. He pulled the gun. It was a small silver pistol, the kind carried by men who were dangerous but who preferred to be dangerous quietly. He held it at chest height, aimed at Nyla. The rain was falling harder now, and the lights from the distant terminal reflected on the wet metal. You think you can walk onto my tarmac and take what belongs to my partners? Kane said. You have no idea who this runs through. You have no idea how deep this goes, or who will come after you. Nyla did not step back. She looked at the gun with the expression of someone who had already factored it in. You just pulled a weapon on a billionaire on an international airport tarmac, she said. Smile, Victor. She pointed upward. In the cockpit window of the Boeing 777 30 feet above them, Captain Julian Moreau pressed his mobile phone flat against the glass. The flash activated once, and from beneath the landing gear of the aircraft, from the shadows between the enormous wheels and the rain-wet concrete, 4 figures stepped forward. They wore tactical gear and carried weapons that made Kane's pistol look like a prop. Metropolitan Police, Specialist Firearms Command. Red targeting lasers bloomed across Victor Kane's chest like 3 small, lethal flowers. Drop the weapon on the ground now. Kane's eyes moved to the officers, to the aircraft window, to Nyla. The pistol slipped from his fingers. It clattered on the concrete. He was against the van in 4 seconds, face against the metal side, hands wrenched behind him. He was shouting about authority and territory, and people who would be coming for her. The officers worked with the complete indifference of people whose job required them not to care about what people shouted while being arrested. Nyla watched. When the cuffs closed, she stepped forward. She spoke quietly enough that only Kane could hear. Your partners will not come after me, she said. Once the forensic audit is public, they will be entirely occupied with trying to stay out of prison. She stepped back. She turned to the lead officer. The contraband is in the aircraft's forward cargo hold. Crates marked aircraft parts. I have a complete digital trail connecting Kane's operation to Captain Bryce Voss and to 3 members of Horizon Airways Board of Directors. The officer looked at her, took in the hoodie, the bruise, the absolute steadiness in her eyes. And who are you? He asked. Nyla Sinclair pulled her hood down. She let the rain hit her face. "I own the airline," she said. The arrest at Heathrow landed on the global news cycle like a stone dropped from a significant height. By the time Nyla's private jet crossed back over the Atlantic, Horizon Airways was the most searched term in 17 countries. The financial pages were running photographs of the Boeing 777 parked at the remote cargo stand surrounded by police vehicles. Business journalists who had been covering aviation for 20 years were calling their editors to say they needed more space. Nyla did not look at any of it. She was reviewing the forensic audit. 3 members of Horizon's board of directors, the audit committee chair, the compensation chair, and Gerald Ashton, the 71-year-old chairman who had run the board since before Donovan Hale was hired. The money traced through a series of shell companies with registration addresses in the Cayman Islands, each one at the correct legal distance from the one before it. The kind of distance that works right up until someone with the right tools and enough motivation follows the thread all the way back. Nyla followed it all the way back. She had the complete documentation ready when her car pulled up to Horizon's Manhattan headquarters at 10:40 in the morning. She was wearing a tailored white suit. The bruise on her left cheek was stark against the collar. She did not cover it. She wore it into the building, past the lobby cameras, past the security desk, through the executive elevator. She would not cover it. Donovan Hale was waiting at the elevator bank. He had not slept. "The board is meeting upstairs," he said quietly. "They are furious. Gerald Ashton is calling it a PR disaster of your own making. They are saying you endangered the company's stock price and chose personal confrontation over institutional protection." Nyla stepped out of the elevator. "Meaning I did not bury it," she said. "Meaning exactly that." She walked toward the boardroom inside 12 faces and 12 chairs, every one of them wearing the expression of people who believed they were about to manage a situation. Gerald Ashton at the head of the table, 71 and formidable in the way that men become formidable when enough decades have passed without anyone telling them no. "Our stock is down 16%, Ashton said. "You have turned a personnel matter into a global spectacle. You exposed this company to extraordinary liability, and you did it without consulting a single member of this board." Nyla set a black folder on the table. She slid it to the center. "That," she said, "is a forensic audit of the JFK to Heathrow route over the past 24 months. She slid a second folder. "That is the documentation of the Cayman shell companies through which the profits were channeled." And that, she slid, a third, "is the list of board members whose signatures appear on the subsidiary agreements." The room went quiet. Ashton opened the first folder. He read the first page. He did not open the second. "A copy of all 3 documents," Nyla said, "was delivered to the FBI field office on Federal Plaza at 8 this morning. There are agents in the lobby of this building right now. I have confirmed this personally." She tapped her phone. "I have exercised the hostile restructuring clause in my ownership agreement. The board is dissolved, effective as of 11 this morning." She looked at the door. "I would encourage you to leave before the cameras in the lobby get a clear image of you walking out in handcuffs." She said that tends to follow a person. Ashton opened his mouth, closed it. Around the table, chairs pushed back. Suits stood. Briefcases were collected with varying degrees of haste. 3 board members left quickly without speaking, which told Nyla everything she needed to know about which 3. The others followed, some with the dazed quality of people who were not expecting to be involved in something that would be reported on the evening news. Gerald Ashton was last. He paused at the door. "You should have come to us," he said. "We could have handled this quietly." "The way Elena Vargas was handled quietly," Nyla said, "the way 8 months of crew complaints were handled quietly, the way the passengers on that route have been handled quietly for 2 years." Ashton did not answer. He left. Nyla stood alone in the boardroom of the company she had saved 11 days ago. She walked to the window. Manhattan below her, the grid of it, the organized ambition of it. Millions of people in motion toward the things they were trying to build. She picked up the phone. "Naomi," she said when her assistant answered, "issue the release. Horizon Airways is officially in restructuring. The new operating identity is Apex Horizon, effective immediately." Naomi confirmed. The release was queued, the board dissolution was filed, the new operating name was registered. There is one more thing, Nyla added. Tell them I would like to use a photograph from the tarmac this morning for the press package, the one where I am in the hoodie. A brief pause. Yes, Naomi said. That one. The federal courthouse on Center Street was not a building that made people feel comfortable. That was the architecture's job. Marble floors and ceiling heights designed to remind everyone who entered that the institution was larger than any individual within it. Bryce Voss entered in a wrinkled gray suit. No uniform, no captain's bars, no tailored fit and structured shoulders. Just a man in civilian clothes walking into a room where the things he did would be examined in daylight. He was 54 years old, and for the first time in 28 years, he looked it. Nyla Sinclair was already in the building. She was seated in the front row of the gallery, spine straight, hands folded in her lap, the bruise still faintly visible on her face. Yellow-green now at the outer edges where it was beginning to fade, but still clearly what it was. When Voss entered and saw her, his step did not quite falter, almost. The charges were read: assault and battery, workplace misconduct, conspiracy to commit cargo fraud, federal transport violations, accessory to smuggling. Nyla testified for 22 minutes. She did not perform a motion. She stated what happened in the order that it happened, with the dates and times and direct quotations that she had not needed to write down because they were permanently present in her memory, the way certain things are permanently present once they have happened to you. She did not look at Voss while she testified. When she stepped down, she walked past him without slowing. She did not glance at him. She did not need to. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Nyla was approached by a young woman in a Horizon flight attendant uniform, pressed in neat, name tag reading Esperanza. She could not be older than 23. She was waiting with the particular posture of someone who had rehearsed what they were going to say and was not sure they were going to manage to say it. Miss Sinclair, Esperanza said. Nyla stopped, turned. I have been flying this route for 2 years, Esperanza said. I knew something was wrong with the carts. We all knew. But Voss was untouchable, and everyone who said anything disappeared, and so the rest of us just kept flying. You were afraid, Nyla said. Not as a judgment, as a fact. Yes. Her eyes were filling. I am sorry I did not say something sooner. Nyla looked at her for a moment. You are saying something now, she said. That is what matters. And you are not going to be afraid on those flights anymore. Not because someone told you not to be, because the thing that made you afraid no longer exists. Esperanza nodded. A single tear ran down her face. She wiped it away quickly with the efficiency of someone who did not like to cry in uniform. Nyla held out her hand. Esperanza took it. They shook once firmly, and Nyla Sinclair walked out of the courthouse and into the New York morning. The new Apex Horizon Crew Training Center opened on a Wednesday morning in a building in Long Island City that had been renovated into something that bore no resemblance to the corporate beige of the previous iteration. There were no speeches and no press. Nyla did not believe in speeches without action following them. She called Lila Vargas into the room that had been designated as the Director of Passenger Experience Office. The nameplate on the door had been there for 2 days. Lila had walked past it 3 times without going in. Nyla was already inside. This is yours, Nyla said, gesturing at the room, the desk, the window overlooking the training floor below. Your first assignment is to write the new crew conduct guidelines, not policy language. Language that flight attendants will actually read and recognize as describing a real situation. Layla looked at the nameplate on the door. I stood up once, she said. You stood up when it cost something, Nyla said. That is not once. That is everything. She paused. You also put yourself between us. That is a different thing than compliance. Layla was quiet for a moment. I knew something was wrong for 3 years, she said. With Voss, with the route, with what happened to Elena. I filed nothing. I said nothing. I need you to know that. I know, Nyla said, and I know why. She looked at her. The new guidelines you write, I want them to include what makes people stay silent when they know something is wrong, not as a criticism, as an honest accounting of how things actually work, so that the next crew member who notices something uncomfortable has a framework for what to do with it. Layla nodded slowly. She stepped into the office. She touched the desk like someone who wanted to confirm it was real. What happened to Elena? She said. Do you know? Elena Vargas is being reinstated with full back pay for the 6 months she was wrongfully terminated, plus a formal written apology from the company. Her record has been corrected. She has been offered the same route she was working when Voss fired her. Did she accept? She asked for a different route, Nyla said. She asked for the New York to Nairobi leg. She said she wants the extra hours. Lila laughed. It was a short, surprised laugh, the kind that comes out when something moves you and you did not have time to prepare for it. Sounds like Elena, she said. 3 days after the training center opened, Elias Cruz walked into his first pre-flight briefing as captain. His uniform was the same one he had been wearing the night of the incident. Same rank pins, but the bearing in it had changed. Not the clothes, the person inside them. He ran the briefing precisely. He introduced himself to the full crew with his first name and without the particular authority performance that Voss used to fill a room. He asked each crew member to tell him one thing about the route that they knew from experience that was not in the manual. They did. He wrote it down. The morning that Apex Horizon Flight 001 pushed back from Gate 12 at JFK was a clear morning. The kind of cold and bright that made everything look sharper than it usually did. Nyla Sinclair boarded last. She was not in a hoodie. She was in a simple dark navy blazer, hair pulled back, comfortable shoes, a carry-on that was slightly less worn than the duffel she had brought 3 weeks earlier. She carried herself the way she always carried herself, with the posture her grandmother had given her at 14 years old in a Charlotte department store. The posture that said, I know who I am, and that is not something I am offering for debate. She stopped at the galley before going to her seat. A flight attendant named Marcus Torres was going through the pre-departure checklist. 26, new to the Apex Horizon uniform, which he was wearing with the slightly self-conscious care of someone who wanted to do it justice. Nyla extended her hand. I'm Nyla Sinclair, she said. I own the airline. What's your name? Marcus Torres blinked. He shook her hand. Marcus Torres, ma'am. Been flying for 3 years. Any concerns about today's flight, Marcus? He thought about the question with genuine care. None, ma'am. The cabin is in good shape. Galley is stocked. Crew had a good briefing. Good. She looked at him directly. If you ever see something that concerns you on this aircraft, your first responsibility is to the passenger, not the chain of command. The passenger. He held her gaze. Yes, ma'am, thank you. She moved to her seat, seat 1A. She settled in, put her carry-on in the overhead bin, sat down, and looked out the window at the tarmac, at the gray morning, at the baggage carts moving with the efficient indifference of people who did not know or care what was significant about this particular departure. Sofia Alvarez was in seat 3A. She had booked it specifically. She was writing a piece about Apex Horizon's founding for a travel publication that reached 4 million readers, and she had wanted to be on the first flight. When she saw Nyla settle in, she did not immediately speak. She gave her a moment. Then when Nyla turned and their eyes met, Sofia smiled with the warm recognition of people who had gone through something together. I posted the footage, Sofia said. All of it. The confrontation, the slap, Lila saying no, you on the tarmac in the rain. I know, Nyla said. 48 million views. Was any of it part of a plan? Nyla considered the question. The plan, she said, was to board my airline and sit in the seat I paid for and see what happened. She paused. That turned out to be enough. Sofia closed her notebook. She looked at Nyla with the expression of a journalist who had found the one true center of a story. You never got angry, she said. Not once in any of the footage. You were completely calm. Nyla turned to look out the window. I was angry, she said. I have been angry about this specific thing since I was 14 years old. She was quiet for a moment. But there is a difference between feeling anger and giving someone else the use of it. If I had shouted on that plane, the story would have been about a woman who shouted on a plane. She turned back to Sofia. I needed the story to be about what actually happened. Sofia wrote that down. The cockpit door opened. Captain Elias Cruz walked out in full uniform, his posture easy and professional. He saw Nyla in seat 1A and stopped. And something about the sight of it, the actual sight of her in that seat on this flight, seemed to require a moment from him. He walked to her row. Miss Sinclair, he said, The aircraft is ready, full crew, full brief, clear weather to Heathrow. Thank you, Captain Cruz. She looked at him. How does it feel? He considered the question seriously. It feels right, he said. It feels like something that should have happened sooner. Yes, Nyla said. It does. He nodded once, went back to the cockpit. From behind the galley curtain, Elena Vargas appeared. She was in the full Apex Horizon uniform, sleeves pressed, hair neat, carrying a tray with water and small packages of mixed nuts that she was setting on the aisle armrests with the quiet efficiency of someone who was good at this job and was glad to be doing it again. She stopped at seat 1A. She and Nyla looked at each other. Elena did not know how to say what she wanted to say, and so she said the truest version of it. Thank you, she said, for coming back for me. Nyla shook her head. You never should have had to be found, she said. I'm sorry it took this long. Elena pressed her lips together, nodded once firmly in the way of someone who needed to hear that and was going to put it away and move forward. She handed Nyla the water. She continued down the aisle. The aircraft began to push back from the gate. Outside the window, the JFK ground crew moved out of the way, the orange wands crossing behind them in the signal that clearance was given. The engines built from a whisper to a low, steady roar. The terminal slid out of view. Nyla's phone buzzed once on her tray table. She looked at the screen. A message from her grandmother in Charlotte. 8 words. Shoulders back, baby. I saw you. I saw you. Nyla sat with those 8 words, her grandmother who had bought a red silk scarf in a department store in 1998 and walked out with her head level. Her grandmother who had taught a 14-year-old girl that dignity is not something someone else can take from you. Her grandmother who had watched the news coverage on the television in her living room and recognized the posture of her granddaughter's spine before she recognized her face. Something in Nyla's chest unclenched, not in relief, in completion, the specific feeling of a promise that had been kept, not made, not intended, but actually, finally, kept. She typed back, They saw all of us, Grandma. That was the point. She set the phone face down on the tray table. The runway opened up ahead of the aircraft, long and gray and straight and available. The engines built. The plane accelerated, pressing her gently back into the cream leather of seat 1A, the most prestigious seat on the aircraft. The seat that Captain Bryce Voss had decided she did not belong in, the seat that she owned in every sense of the word. The nose came up, the wheels left the ground, an Apex Horizon Flight 001, captained by Elias Cruz, staffed by Lila Vargas's new generation of crew, carrying a travel blogger in row 3, and a reinstated flight attendant in the galley, and a 26-year-old billionaire in seat 1A lifted away from JFK into the clear, cold morning and pointed its nose toward London. The person in seat 1A sees everything. Make sure what they see is worth seeing. Captain Bryce Voss never flew again. At his sentencing, the judge cited the assault, the conspiracy charges, and 28 years of conduct that had been dismissed and filed away and never acted on. He received a sentence that ended not just his career, but the untouchable version of himself he had been building since the day he first pinned on those wings. The uniform went with the sentence. The authority he had borrowed from it went too. Every crew member on that aircraft changed after that night, not because of a training module or a memo from corporate headquarters, but because they had watched one woman refuse to be moved from a seat she paid for, and then watched the entire architecture of the power that tried to move her come apart piece by piece at her feet. Lila Vargas writes the training guidelines. Now, one of the lines she insisted on including reads, "Silence is not neutrality. Silence is always a choice and it always has consequences." Captain Cruz flies with that understanding on every departure. Elena Vargas flies the New York to Nairobi route and is by all crew accounts exceptional at it. If you have ever been told you do not belong somewhere, you do. You always did. The moment you choose to stand your ground, not with noise, but with the absolute stillness of someone who knows exactly who they are, you create a space that cannot be taken back. Nyla Sinclair did not fight for seat 1A. She simply refused to leave it. That refusal changed an airline, exposed a crime, protected future passengers whose names she will never know, and sent a message that traveled 48 million times around the world in 72 hours. Karma does not miss. In this case, it arrived first class in a gray hoodie with scuffed white sneakers, and it sat down and waited for the world to catch up. If this story moved you, if you felt every moment of what happened in that cabin, please take 1 second right now and hit the like button. It costs you nothing, and it means everything to us. It tells the platform that stories like this one deserve to be heard by more people, and that is exactly what we are trying to do here, one story at a time. If you are new here, subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a new episode. We put out stories every week about dignity, justice, and the quiet power of people who refuse to be erased. You do not want to miss what is coming next. And before you go, tell me in the comments who got the most deserved consequence in this story. Was it Voss, Kane, the board, or Senator? There is no wrong answer. I read every single comment, and I genuinely want to know what you think. Thank you for watching. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. See you in the next.